Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Saturday, August 31st. Today is day 330 since the attacks by Hamas on October 7th. Escalations in the West Bank have continued with 4 days of Israeli raids into the occupied Palestinian territory. 4 Israelis were wounded overnight into today in 2 separate West Bank car bombing attacks at the Karmeh Tzur settlement and the Gush Etzion junction near Hebron. The assailants in both attacks were killed. Israeli security officials say that the explosive came from the same weapons laboratory in Hebron, where the Israeli army then arrested 6 suspects. In the Gush Etzion junction incident, the IDF said that the car bomb exploded at a gas station. The vehicle's driver exited the car and tried to attack soldiers and then was shot dead by Israeli forces that were at the scene. 1 Israeli officer was moderately wounded and another sustained light injuries from being shot. During the attack at the settlement, Karmeh Tzur, a Palestinian man entered the area in his vehicle. According to the Israeli military, the man opened fire. A local security officer rammed his car. During the exchange of fire, an explosive device in the man's car detonated. The security officer was lightly wounded and taken to the hospital. Hamas greeted those overnight attacks as heroic operations, but did not take responsibility. Following the 2 attacks, which Israeli security officials believe were both coordinated, Hebron's Tomb of the Patriarchs was closed temporarily before being reopened to both Muslim worshippers and Jewish worshippers on their respective sides under stricter security measures. Today is the 4th day of Israel's assault on Jenin. The Israeli military said 2 Hamas-affiliated militants were killed in a clash at the refugee camp during the IDF's ongoing operations there. This started on Wednesday, and if you have not been seeing the videos or the pictures, there has been a call for displacement of Palestinians from some Israeli officials. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said that 20 Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank as a result of the Jenin raid since the start of the incursion on Wednesday. The Palestinian Health Ministry has said that that number is 22 people, including a person with disabilities and several children. The Israeli army says that 14 militants have been killed so far and that dozens of explosive devices have been destroyed. There was an article that was published that I wanted to bring to your attention in the UK's Guardian. It was published today. It's called "Israel has been accused of using a 10-year-old girl as a human shield as it carried out its devastating attack on the occupied Palestinian territory." It's related to these incursions in Nur Shams, Tulkarm that have happened in the past several days. When Israeli soldiers arrived at the modest house along the alleyway in Nur Shams camp on Wednesday night, they sent the woman and 4 children out to the street, but they kept hold of this little girl named Malek Shahab. They took the muzzle off their dog and it went straight up to the little girl and sniffed her. Terrified, she's 10 years old, she pled to be with her mother, but the soldiers seemed to just have one phrase in Arabic: "Open the doors." The platoon pushed her up to each of the doors in her aunt's house, according to Malek's account, while they remained braced behind her, ready to fire at whoever might be inside. One door wouldn't open, and in her desperation to obey, the girl remembers hammering on it with her head. I just would encourage you to read that article to get an idea of what we're talking about when we're talking about military incursions into the West Bank and the occupied territories. The IDF says they're attempting to eradicate threats, but I want you to hear about the terror that Palestinian families are experiencing. The Palestinian Red Crescent said a Palestinian man in his 80s, Tawfiq Ahmad Yunus Kandil, was shot dead by the IDF outside of his home in the West Bank city of Jenin. And all of that is just in the West Bank. In Gaza, we do know that children today, Saturday, have begun receiving polio vaccines. This is a day before the large-scale rollout that starts tomorrow. Tomorrow is when the planned pause in fighting, the humanitarian pause. It's not in all of Gaza. It's in 3 separate regions in phases as the rollout by the UN World Health Organization of polio vaccines begins. The Associated Press said that roughly 10 infants receiving doses of the vaccines in the Nasser hospital at Khan Yunis started this afternoon. Hours earlier, Gaza's health ministry said hospitals had received 89 dead today, including 26 who died overnight as a result of Israeli bombardments and an additional 205 people wounded. This is one of the highest daily death tolls in months. Palestinian health authorities said that Israeli strikes killed at least 48 people in Gaza, and Al Jazeera reported the death toll as 61 people in the last 24 hours. The death tolls continue to rise. So we don't want to be overly optimistic about a humanitarian pause in any way, shape, or form, as dozens of people continue to be killed in the last 24 hours in Gaza. The IDF said its forces killed militants and dismantled military infrastructure in Gaza City, and that a gunman was killed in Western Rafah. The Israeli army said the U.S. Unloaded 3,577 humanitarian aid packages bound for residents of Gaza through the port at Ashdod, and the health ministry in Gaza has the latest toll. The death is at least 40,691 Palestinians killed and at least 94,060 Palestinians wounded. In Israel, speaking about Netanyahu's insistence on Israeli control of the Philadelphia corridor between Gaza and Egypt, a demand that Israeli and foreign officials warn jeopardizes hostage deal negotiations. Members of Hostages and Missing Family Forum said every Israeli should know if their children are if he or she is kidnapped, the prime minister would do anything to maintain the government, even at the cost of causing their death while in Hamas captivity. Protests calling for a ceasefire hostage deal and demonstration against Israel's ruling coalition are set to take place tonight, Saturday night, across Israel. And the IDF said that 40 rockets were launched towards Western Galilee from Lebanon as escalations with Hezbollah have continued. The Israeli army said that its Air Force attacked a building housing Hezbollah operatives in South Lebanon yesterday. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris's campaign is kicking off a major push focused on outreach to Jewish voters that'll start next Tuesday with a national organizing call that's headlined by the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, who would be the first Jewish spouse of a U.S. vice president. After interviewing hundreds of students, Columbia University's Task Force on Anti-Semitism released a report yesterday detailing how Jewish and Israeli students experienced threats, harassment, exclusion, and assault over the past academic year. You will recall that Columbia University's president, Namat Shafiq, resigned earlier this month after months of far-reaching fury at her handling of the protests over the Israel-Hamas war and questions about how she was managing a deeply divided campus. That report was just released. The U.S. military and Iraq launched a joint raid targeting suspected Islamic State group militants in the Iraqi Western Desert, and at least 15 people were killed. That happened today. 7 American troops were hurt, according to officials. The U.S. military Central Command said the militants were armed with weapons, grenades, and explosive belts during a battle on Thursday, which Iraqi forces said happened in the Anbar Desert. The main question we're asking is what can be done? What can be done now in the midst of these ongoing realities and catastrophes and ongoing death and destruction? And we talk about that a lot at CMEP, 330 days of ongoing destruction, ethnic cleansing. Tomorrow, in my Sunday devotional and daily update, I'll be talking about moving from apathy to advocacy and types of advocacy we can do: social advocacy, spiritual advocacy, political advocacy, economic advocacy, legal advocacy, the ways we can continue to use our voices even when we don't see forward progress. Do not give up hope. Highlight facts and realities of what's happening on the ground, the way that lives are being affected, from the tens of thousands who've already lost loved ones to all those waiting for hostages to be returned home, to those who've been longing for, prisoners held in Israeli prisons to be released. There are so many issues we can work on, and so we'll continue to do that together. Might God go before us. Amen.